Alright. So we downloaded this gun from Sketchfab. This guy here. Here's the link. I put it up here. You guys can go ahead and download that, import it into Maya. It seems to go in pretty well. Alright. So this thing actually has quite a few moving parts. That clip will pull out. Got the trigger. Is this like a folding stock? That thing comes down, I guess. I don't know what it does. That thing moves. That bolt. That sight will rotate. I think that's a sight. I don't know, I'm gonna have to look at a picture of that. Oh, this stock, I think, rotates. Like, that's a hinge right there. Yeah, so, I mean, doesn't have a whole lot going on, but yeah. Alright. Well, so first and foremost here, we gotta get the textures on this thing. So, let's go to the hypergraph. I'm sorry, the hypershade. So go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. Windows Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And let's take a look at that directory of textures. So it's got just about everything under the sun, really just for Maya. I mean, we're not going to be doing any rendering or anything, so we could just pull in the texture, which looks like this one. Looks like there might be a darker version and then a lighter version. There's like multiple versions of this, because, for example, this is this AO here, that's ambient occlusion. And there's like 2 versions of it. So in your hypershade, it looks like they're labeled here. Oh, it actually, there's 2 pieces, yeah. So click on that AK12, and then just go down to color on the right. There's a little checkered box. Click that little checkered box, and then go to File, And then down on the down on the right is a little file folder to the right of image name, and then you can pull in that one, AK121 underscore albedo. And that looks like it pulls in the first part. I hope that's right. And then do the same thing for AK2 underscore 2. Looks like it's got some blood on it. The bump map, you should be able to pull in. There's a bump map one. You can pull in the normal map for that by doing the same thing, just pulling in the file. And then there's a drop down that says, instead of use it as a bump, use it as tangent space normals.
Which one do we do that for?
So when you click on just any one of them, there is a drop down that says bump normal mapping, and you can click on the file thing, and that one you can pull in as an image, but there's a drop down. I don't see it now, but it basically, yeah, here it is. It says use as, and it defaults to bump, but you can change it to tangent space normals. I'll do it again for this number 2 here. So just go down to map where it says bump normal mapping under map, and then go to file, pull it in the same way, and change that to tangent space normals, and then you can pull in that bump file. And then, yeah, then now you can see, like on the clip, it's got the you can see a lot more detail in the model. Which is kind of cool. Somebody Google real quick where we pull in metallic. Because I know, I mean, there's a plug in for Unreal, but transparency is opacity. So there's one of them called opacity. You can pull that in for transparency. And that does not so when you change that transparency feature, the way you'll know that it works is if you have the red dot on the site here. And what you got to do is you got to go to renderer, and then there's a viewport under viewport here for renderer. There's an option in there under hardware render 2.0 settings where you change the transparency algorithm to alpha cut. So when you in your texture settings, there's a texture that you can pull in that's an opacity texture. You want to pull that in the transparency. I'll show you here. So under transparency, you want to pull in a file the same way. You want to pull in that opacity file. And then when you pull that in, it's going to make your gun look weird. You have to go to your render settings and the option box for viewport 2.0, and then go to transparency algorithm and change that to alpha cut. And then you'll be able to see the red dot sight the right way. I'm just gonna make a guess of where to put this metallic unless anybody's found it. Maybe specular, I don't know. Yeah, that looks good enough. So all I've pulled in for this thing so far is just the color, the specular, the transparency, and the normal map. That's all I've been able to pull in. I don't know how to do the ambient inclusion. And there's roughness too, which I guess goes in. I don't know where that goes. But you could probably Google all those things. They plug right into Unreal. Every single one of them, which is nice. So let's go ahead and save this scene. Go to File, Save Scene As. And just save it as, I guess this is an AK. What is this thing? Torn AK12. Okay.
There he comes.
Keith, my man. We have decided to do your weapon, sir. Yes, it's very large. Let me get you this file here.
Is that the AK-12?
That's what it looks like. It takes about 100 years to download, so.
How did you add the metallic?
I put it in specular. Oh yeah, I forgot I did that one too.
Specular color.
Let me see. Yeah, specular color. There you go, Keith. You want to take a picture of that? Will you? So I told you guys that we were gonna do some like character stuff with this gun. When you are doing character stuff with guns, you want to make sure that your gun is scaled appropriately to the character. Guys, do me a favor, jump onto the 11secondclub.com and download the Maya version of Norman. Mr. Norman here. That's a rig. I think we played with Norman in the beginning. Go ahead and download him. You're going to want to reference him in to your weapon scene. File create reference. And that will allow you to scale the gun to the size of his hands. You can group all the objects in the gun in the hypergraph hierarchy, and then scale the group to match Norman's scale. And I'll go over that step by step. Alright. So you got Norman here, downloaded Norman version 010. Go ahead and extract that. I got my gun scene here, so I'm going to reference Norman in. So I'll go File. Actually, you know what I'm going to do first, though? I'm going to group this gun. So you just select all the gun, and then Control G. Group that bad boy. You can call that Group Torn AK12. Yep.
When I press G, it doesn't save as.
It's Control G.
Oh, okay.
To select your group, it's pretty easy. To select a group, you just select any object on the weapon, and then just tap up arrow, and it will select the group. So that's a quick way you can get to the group to scale the group. And scale is R on your keyboard. Okay. So now to get Mr. Norman in there, we just go to File, Create Reference. File, Create Reference. And you want to reference in that char_Norman A1.mb file. And what referencing does, referencing is a way for you to pull in something to a scene for like a lot of different reasons. But when it's referenced in the scene, you can't really mess with it. Like you can't, and it can't like mess with other stuff in your scenes. And there's a, you can like switch it on and off too. So like referencing is a good way to like reference a bunch of files into a scene that are outside the scene, if that works, if that makes sense. So File, Create Reference, and I'll reference in that Norman MB, and oh my god, he's about 100 times bigger than the weapon. So it's a good idea that we did this. So you're just going to want to select the gun group and move that up and scale it to fit his hands. And don't be scared to rotate it. What you want to do to group something is you select all the objects and then hit Control G. And then in order to select the group, you select any object on the gun and tap the up arrow on your keyboard, and that will select it. you want to fit it in his hand and see if you can get the right scale. It's looking like about 8.5 in XYZ is going to be about right. Maybe even bigger than that. That looks about right, though. When you're scaling this thing, you want to like look at the grip, and you just want to make sure that that grip's going to fit in his hand, and that finger can fit in the trigger area. Mine actually might be a little small. Yeah, I was a little small on that. I've scaled mine up to about 10. Hey, I didn't even know you're here.
Oh yeah, I snuck in.
Just hiding in the front, huh? Alright. So once you got that the way you like it, again, I've scaled my group to about 10 in XYZ. That seems to work. What you can do is go to File, Reference Editor. File, Reference Editor. And you will see Norman's character in there. And you can just click the little checkbox next to it and switch it off. We will not need Norman for the time being. We are going to come back to Mr. Norman at a later date. So we're just going to switch him off. And you can select the group and keep your scale, but all the translates and rotates, set those back to 0. And it should pop back to its original spot on the grid. And that's where we're going to rig it.
Is Norman just supposed to show up in that reference editor box?
Yeah, if you go to File, Reference Editor, you should see it there. If you reference Norman in, did you import Norman?
Yeah.
If you imported Norman, then you got some bigger problems to deal with.
Oh, should I delete him?
To delete Norman, if you've imported him, just go to Windows, General Editors, Hypergraph Hierarchy. Let's see what you're looking at here. So you're just looking for a long chain of stuff like this big thing here. Just delete that. Should be able to just select the top node and delete it, but I'd just go ahead and select that whole, just a big chunk of that stuff. The longest one. Yeah, just delete that. Yeah, there you go. Alright, so let's go ahead and start throwing some joints in this gun. Very first thing we do is we want a root joint always. So let's go ahead and go to your rigging tab in the upper left. Drop that down. Where it says modeling, change that to rigging. And then go to your rigging tab, and you want to double click your joint tool, and you want to turn off variable bone radius settings. Turn off variable bone radius settings. So double click that joint tool. There's a little checkbox in there, and it's called variable bone radius settings. Turn that off. And go ahead and drop a root joint in the center of the grid. If you hold X and click the center of the grid, it will do that for you. Just go ahead and drop a joint right in there. Tap enter and call that root. You always want to have a root joint for all the rigs that you make right in the center of the grid.
How do we get the gun back to 000?
To get the gun back to 000, you select a group, and you want to change translate XYZ and rotate XYZ to 0. Yeah, you can shift select them all and then hit 0, or you can change them all individually. It doesn't matter. And typically what I like to do is I like to, when I'm doing guns, I'll move the handle, I'll move the gun to where the handle lines up with the root. To be honest with you, I don't care about doing that because we're going to have to move it and adjust it anyway. So this is fine where it's at. Those joints are a little big for me to work with, so I'm going to change my joint size. Windows animation joint size. I'm sorry. Display animation joint size. Display animation joint size, and set that to a good working size that works for you visually, so you're going to be able to see that and work with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by duplicating this joint, and let's move it to the I really want to put a joint in that handle, and I don't know why. Something's telling me to do it. So I really don't want to do it. Let's try and get away without. What you want to try and do when you rig stuff like this is you want to use as little joints as possible. You don't want to just put in extra joints to put in extra joints, because it's going to end up being more work. So let's not do that. So let's throw one in for the trigger. So duplicate that root joint and move that on over to the trigger. Is this friggin' gun off center? This thing's off center, man. Are you kidding me? Alright, so we need to before we do that, we need to get this thing on center. If you tap your spacebar and go into your top view, you will notice that the gun is off center. Yay. Okay. Very simple to fix that. So if you zoom into the center of the grid in your top view, you will see that bone in there. And you want to select the group of the gun, and you just want to move it over so that the center line of the gun lines up with the center of the grid. Okay, see how I'm doing here in my top view? Yeah, all I did was, so the gun is off center, horizontally. It's in a decent place, vertically. So what you do is tap your space bar, and you want to go into your top view. Okay. Now in order to select the group, we want to move the group of the gun, so it moves all parts. In order to select the group, just select any piece on the gun and tap up arrow. And then tap up arrow. Then go ahead and zoom in to the center of the grid. You'll see that bone in there that you created, that root bone. And then what you want to do is tap W on your keyboard to move the gun. And then just move it on over to the left. And you'll see there's like a center edge. There's a center edge, and you just want to line that center edge up with the center of the grid. Okay. So you just want to make sure that our gun is centered in the grid. Alright, now I'm going to get even more complicated on you guys. Go ahead and zoom in, tap your space bar, go back into perspective view, and go ahead and zoom into the center of the grid, and then select your group. Select your group by selecting an object and then tapping up arrow. And if you notice, if you look at the center of the grid, now that we've moved this group over, the pivot point for the group is off center, okay? We want to make that pivot point, we want to center that pivot point again. Okay, so in order to do that, you want to tap W to move the group, and then you want to tap insert on your keyboard. Okay, the insert key is above the delete key. And insert will bring up the pivot point mover, and then you can actually select the middle of that and you can move the pivot point. Okay? And what you want to do is you want to hold X and snap that pivot point to the center of the grid. Okay, if you hold X, it will snap that pivot point to the center of the grid, and then you can hit insert again to set the pivot point. Okay, I'll go over that one more time. And this goes for like anything, like everything has a pivot point, okay? Objects, bones, you name it, right? So my pivot point's off center here. I can see that. I'm going to make it on center. So I'm just going to tap insert on my keyboard. And now I can grab the pivot point. I can move it around. And if I hold X while I move it, it'll snap to grid points. I want to snap it to the center. Then tap insert again to set it. Now our gun is centered. Our gun group is centered. And the pivot point for the gun group is now at 0, 0, 0, which is what we want. Alright, now we can duplicate that root joint and put it over to the trigger. So go ahead and select the root joint, click Control D for duplicate, move it on over to the center. So you want to move that joint to where the trigger will rotate. And if you tap 4 on your keyboard, you'll see in wireframe that the trigger actually has like a box attached to it. And what you want to do is put that joint in the center of the box, because that's going to be where the rotate pivot for that trigger is, okay? And if you look at it in a side view, you can get really accurate. So you just want to, like, in your mind, like, imagine where the rotate point is going to be for that trigger. Probably somewhere like right there. Okay? And just remember, guys, there's good and there's good enough. We're just going for good enough right now. Nobody in here is a weapon pro. Okay. What else moves on this thing? The clip, maybe? Let's do a, let's throw a joint in for the clip. So you want to make sure that you name that trigger joint. So change the name of it from root 2 to trigger. And now go ahead and duplicate that trigger joint. And let's give it a the clip. We'll do one for the clip. To be honest with you, it really doesn't matter where you put the clip joint. Probably somewhere in the center of it would be fine. And you want to name that one clip. Looks like the sight is going to need a joint as well. Looks like that sight rotates up. So down at the bottom of the sight is a little hinge. Throw a joint there. Call it sight. Go ahead and duplicate that clip joint. And that one should be fairly easy. If you zoom in on it from a side view, the hinge actually has like a polygon with a crosshairs in the center of it. Just match up the joint with the crosshairs of that polygon. From your side view, it kind of looks like this. It's pretty nice. And you want to call that joint sight. Alright, what else moves on this thing? Does it have a safety? Where's the safety on this thing? Every gun has a safety. This part back here? I don't know, I'm not a gun guy. I do know this stock has a hinge on it. See that hinge for the stock? That is for sure gonna rotate. I think that's called the stock. Right? No. That's the butt. The butt. Yeah. Yeah, so throw a hinge in here. I mean a joint for this hinge. And I guess what did you call it? The butt?
Yeah, that's the butt.
The buttstock?
It's a stock, but it's specifically a butt stock.
The buttstock. Okay, cool. Let's go with that. Alright, so you can duplicate any joint. Move it on over there. And make sure that the joint is centered in the hinge, not only horizontally, but also vertically. So you want to look at it in your side view, but you also want to look at it in your top view. And that one's called buttstock. Let's go with that. There is another part here. I don't know what that does, but it looks like it does something, and there's a hinge, so let's just put it there. I don't know what to tell you to call that one. In my experience, though, like rigging weapons, if you leave out a part and you have to go back and use it, and you didn't rig it, you got a problem. So, I don't know, you can call that like buttstock part or something like that. The bolt is going to need a joint. Go ahead and throw one in the center of the bolt. That thing opens and closes for sure. It doesn't matter where you put that one. Just as long as it's in the bolt. And is bolt B-O-L-T or B-O-L-D-T? Anybody know? So there's a D in there?
No.
Oh. Alright. I can't see anything else on here that we need to move. Anybody see anything that I'm missing?
Right behind the trigger. That little doohickey right there.
What does that do?
That's the lock for the person. If you push that forward, you can take the flip out.
Oh, alright. And that's the hinge there in the center? Maybe? Sure.
Awesome.
Let's go for it. So call that one, I guess, what? Lock? Or something? Alright, anything else? Anybody see anything else that moves on this thing?
Does the barrel move though?
It doesn't look like it. This thing's got a lot of parts to it, but I feel like a lot of the parts that it has to it are for like taking it apart and putting it together. So let's just go with these joints for now. I think that's a pretty good. So we've got the butt stock. We have a part on the butt, and I don't know what it does. We've got the clip, we got the trigger, we got the lock in front of the trigger, we have the root, we have the bolt, we have the sight, and that's it. Oh, yeah, that's it. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 joints total. Okay? What's that? Yeah, I put it there. There's a hinge on it. Yeah, I put it there. That's a different part, yeah. Yeah, that's so that buttstock like rotates around to the side. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I put one there. I put that one in the center. You got it right. Alright, so let's parent these. I would parent that buttstock part to the buttstock. And then parent the buttstock to the root. Parent the clip to the root. Trigger goes to root. You can do the trigger lock. Or I'm sorry, whatever the thing is that's in front of the trigger, that lock, that goes to the root. Sight goes to root. Am I missing anything? Oh yeah, bolt. Bolt goes to root as well. So basically, everything goes to the root except for the part on the buttstock, which will go to the buttstock. And this looks really ugly, but that's what a weapon. It's nothing pretty about it. All right. All right, let's go ahead and save these scenes. And go ahead and save this as like version 2_2. So remember, P is for parent when you guys are parenting stuff. So basically all these joints are parented to the root except for the buttstock part, which is parented to the buttstock. If you've lost your root, you can create another one. Just hold X and snap it to the center. Alright, everybody with me so far? Anybody behind?
I am, but you can go.
Paul.
I'm always behind.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start skinning and waiting, which is, you know, the funnest part of rigging. So go ahead and select your group. Shift select the root joint. And let's go to our option box for the skinning tab under skin, bind skin. Time to bind some skin here. Okay, now, since this is a non-organic thing, one of the things that we could do is, let's see, actually what we are going to do is check remove unused influences. And what we're going to do is we're going to set max influences to 1. Set max influences to 1. And what that's going to do is basically going to say, we're saying that for each joint, one part, there's only going to be one part for each joint. So what's cool about that is it's not going to like blend, you know, the clip between two joints. I think it's going to try and guess here which things go to which things. So let's just hope Maya's smart enough. So let's change max influences to 1. Uncheck removed unused influences. Make sure you have the group of the gun selected and you have shift selected the root joint, and then go ahead and click bind skin. Go ahead and click bind skin. And then you can try and move the joints around and see how incorrectly Maya did that. Wow.
Oh no.
I don't know what it was thinking, but... Alright. Go ahead and tap 5 on your keyboard. Let's go into shaded mode here, and let's start doing some skinning. So let's start with the trigger first. Let's do some easy stuff. Actually, you know what? Let's do select the group, double click your paint skin weights tool, and let's start off by flooding everything to the root, because it's all messed up anyway. So just flood everything to the root. So select your root, click flood. Alright. Now let's move on to the trigger. Go ahead and select that trigger. Double click your paint skin weights tool again. Find the trigger joint and then click flood. So we are going to go through the process here of selecting all the parts that move and flooding them to their appropriate joints. Nothing crazy. Okay? Move on to the clip. Now that clip's got multiple parts to be careful for. It's got something at the bottom, so make sure you select both of those. Double click your paint skin weights tool, select the clip, and flood. Alright. Now let's move on to the crosshairs. Or the sight. I don't think that's a crosshairs, actually. That's a sight. And make sure you select all the parts from that. There's like definitely a few. So go ahead and select all those parts. Double click your paint skin weights tool. Find the sight joint and then click flood. See, this is so much easier doing paint skin weights on a weapon than it is doing that damn crab. That crab almost gave me a heart attack, man. We had to go back and forth. Okay, let's move on to the trigger lock, which is in front of the trigger. That one should be pretty easy. Click that thing, double click your paint skin weights tool, find lock, and then click flood. Okay, let's move on to the buttstock here. And it doesn't matter which one of those you do first. Let's start with that buttstock part. That one should be pretty easy. It's made up of two parts. It's got a hinge and then something else that I don't know what it does. Two parts. Go ahead and select those two parts. Double click your paint skin weights tool. Find the buttstock part and then click flood. Alright, now let's move on to the buttstock. That thing has many parts. It has like a little rubber thing on the back. The main buttstock, a screw, and then a hinge, and then it looks like some sort of a spring on the hinge. The what?
The buttstock part.
No. You mean this thing? No. We just did that. Alright, so then make sure you have all those parts selected. Find the buttstock and then click flood. The buttstock part, we already flooded that to its own joint, and that joint is parented to this joint, so when we rotate the main joint there, it's going to rotate everything. Alright, so now that that is... Oh, that's cool. See, that does that? I don't know why you'd want to do that. I guess if you're packing this gun up and you want to take it somewhere in a suitcase. But I guess, you know, that's why you do that. And I have no idea what this part does. No clue, but it's a something. Clip comes out. So test your parts. Go ahead and grab all your joints that move stuff. Rotate them. Make sure we didn't miss any objects that were part of those. Feeling like we got everything. Everything looked like it works out pretty well. Is it just me, or does it looking like that trigger, the trigger box isn't supposed to rotate? Just the curved part? Alright. Let's fix that trigger. It's not supposed to do that. I don't know what I was thinking. Alright, so what we want to do, since the whole trigger rotates, the whole trigger box there rotates, what we're going to do is we're going to select the vertices of just the box, and we're going to flood those to the root. Okay? So, let me see if there's an easy way to do this. There is an easy way to do this. If you go into wireframe here, tap 4 on your keyboard to go into wireframe, and then right click on there and then click vertex. Right click and hold and click vertex. You can select, you can double click any vertex and it will select the whole box of vertexes there. Double click on any of those vertexes and it'll select the whole box. Then you can double click your paint skin weights tool, select the root, and then click flood. And yeah, that didn't work out exactly how I wanted it to. Alright, so we're going to do this again. Click 4 on your keyboard, go back into wireframe. There's like some, this polygon's kind of weird. So right click on it, go to vertex. This time, instead of double clicking the vertex, just drag a box over one vertex, like a corner. And then you want to hold shift and then tap your greater than symbol on your keyboard, which is right above the right alt. It's like an arrow next to the question mark, to the left of your question mark. So hold shift and tap the greater than symbol, and it's going to select all the objects, or all the vertices here. Just tap it a couple times. Then you should be able to double click your paint skin weights tool, click the root, and then click flood. And that should get all those vertices. God, it still missed some. This thing's like weird. It's got like multiple parts. So you'll have to select, so you'll have to do the exact same thing that you did, but for like the back corners. See how it's like this box is like broken up? It's very bizarre. It's like chopped up into individual faces. So, this time just drag a box over like multiple corner vertices. Hold shift, tap greater than, and then flood that to the root, and you should get it all. You want that entire box to be white like that. You want the entire box to be white. Another way that you could do it is just select the entire trigger, flood that to the root, and then select the trigger part, vertices, and then flood those to the trigger. So it doesn't matter how you do it. You just want the trigger to be to the trigger and that box to be to the flooded to the gun. So let's see how that worked out. Yes. Alright, so we got another problem here with the trigger. Who knew this trigger was going to cause so much problems? So when you rotate the trigger, what's happening here? What's
any more trigger.
what's the problem we see here? It's this polygon is tearing out of its top part here. What you want to do is flood just the corner vertices, the upper corner vertices of this trigger to the root, so that those corner vertices stay put, because this trigger wouldn't just be open like this. So in here, you can go to vertex and just drag a box and hold shift and just select all the corner vertices of the upper part of the trigger like this. There's 6 of them. And flood those to the root. So you're just selecting these 6 corner vertices and flooding those to the root. Alright, that actually didn't look very good, to be honest with you, when I rotated that. So instead of flooding those corners to the root, I think I want to flood those corners to the trigger, because when I rotate this trigger, they stay put and it looks kind of goofy. Looks like a cartoon trigger. See that? I don't think that's right. So instead of flooding those to the root, let's flood these corners here to the trigger. You might have to hide your joints to get them out of the way. So we'll flood those to the trigger instead. And that looks a little bit better. God. I just don't think that this is how.
The rest of the gun is made pre-activated.
I don't think this part was. I think this is the best we're gonna get, to be honest with you.
Good enough.
What's that?
Good enough.
Yeah, good enough, exactly.
If you put this into the game,
Nobody's gonna see that.
yeah, no one's gonna go look straight at the fingers.
No. Alright, when you guys are done with that, you can go ahead and flood the bolt. That's one thing we have not done yet. That just looks like it's one part, so click the bolt, find that, and flood. Alright, after that, go ahead and save your scene as like another version. File save scene as, change it to, I think I'm on like version 3 now. Alright, let's throw some controls in here. Let's go ahead and start with, so click on your curves tab. Let's go ahead and start with a circle. And I'm not going to make that as big as the, you just need to make it big enough to where you can grab it pretty easy. I don't know, I'll go with like 2.5, something like this. It doesn't have to be huge, you just want to be able to grab it. It's not a character, so. This control will be used to not only grab the gun and move it around, but also will snap. We'll use this to like constrain to a character. Alright. And it's always good to name your controls. We can name this one main. Or gun main, to be even more specific. Because you'll probably have one in the scene that'll be called character main or something like that. Alright. Okay, so let's go ahead and move one of these to the buttstock. And one of the things that you can do is just hide your polygons. So you can go to show and just turn off your polygons. And what we're going to do is we're just going to duplicate this one and V-snap it to the buttstock and then shrink it. So you just want to control for the buttstock like that. That can rotate it. And you can just, I mean, it's so much easier to like move joints. I'm sorry, move and snap controls to joints with the polygons hidden. When you hold V, it will snap to stuff. When you have the polygons showing, V will snap to polygons as well, which is a problem. Alright, the next thing to do would be to duplicate that one, move it to the trigger, and then rotate it 90 degrees. So that instead of it being a vertical circle, it's a horizontal circle. Because that trigger's got to rotate horizontal, not vertical. So that's going to be rotated 90 degrees in Z. Okay. And it looks like that lock that's in front of the trigger, that's going to need the same thing, so you can duplicate that one. V, snap it on over. You can even keep that one the same size. And you can duplicate the sight. We can do the same thing for the sight. So duplicate that, snap it to the sight. Duplicate that, snap it to the buttstock part as well. The buttstock part as well. I mean, while we're at it, you could do the same thing for the clip. finish it off, I would duplicate the root and do that for the bolt and shrink that one a little bit. And you can decide if you want it to be a vertical control for the bolt or a horizontal control for the bolt. It doesn't matter. Whatever you feel like is going to work best for you or an animator. Might be a good idea to keep all these like consistent. Most of them are vertical, except for the root. So you could just say, well, that buttstock one isn't. So it doesn't matter. Just make sure you have a control for everything. You can see it. You can grab it easily. And you think an animator would understand, you know. Alright. So let's go ahead and, before we constrain these controls, let's go ahead and parent them appropriately. And last time we did the scorpion thing, we had a little bit of issue with parenting and constraining, and we had to do kind of a workaround, but since then I have figured out the problem. So we won't run into that issue anymore. The problem is that we need to parent before we freeze transformations. What we were doing was we were like freezing transformations, then parenting. Okay? So what we're going to do here is we're going to parent some of these controls together so that when we move the root control, they all move with it. Okay? So let's go ahead and start off with parenting the buttstock part control to the buttstock part. So select the buttstock part control, then hold shift and select the, select the part control first, then select the buttstock control, then tap P to parent. Okay, so when you move that buttstock, it will move the part. Then you want to parent the buttstock control to the root. So select the buttstock control, shift select the root, and tap P. So now root moves buttstock and buttstock part. Now what you want to do is everything else gets parented directly to the root. You can do those all at one time by literally shift selecting all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those controllers, Then you shift select the root and tap P. So you can parent multiple controls at one time to one main control. Okay, again, so you would just shift select all the controls that you want to parent to the root, then just shift select the root and tap P. You can do them all at one time, or you can just parent them all separately to the root. It doesn't matter. Just when you move the root, you want all those controls to follow the root. Just like this. Alright, so now what we want to do is freeze transformations on all these controls so that when you select them, each one individually, they are zeroed out in translate XYZ and rotate XYZ. Okay, so the way we do that is go to show and turn off everything but the controls. So really you just need to turn off joints at this point. So you're just looking at controls here, okay? And then what I want you to do is drag a box and select all the controls, and then go to modify in the option box for freeze transformations. Modify in the option box for freeze transformations. And what you're going to do is uncheck scale and then click freeze transform. Uncheck scale and click freeze transform. And then you'll notice if you select any control other than scale, they're all zeroed out. So basically what that means is at any given time, if you want this gun to like go back to 0 and all the parts to move back into place to where they were, all you do is you just select all the controls and change translate XYZ and rotate XYZ to 0, if that makes sense. So if you want to set your gun back to 0, just select all the controls and change that to 0. Okay, last step here, we want to hide the scale in there so the animators can't mess with it. So just select all those controls again, and then I want you to shift select the words scale XYZ, and then right click on the blue, and then you want to do lock and hide selected. Okay, if you're viewing not seeing this, hit Control A. It'll pop out the attribute editor. It'll switch from attribute editor to channel box. Select all those controls, shift select scale XYZ so they turn blue, right click on it, and then go all the way down to lock and hide selected. Lock and hide selected. That's a really cool way of hiding stuff from animators, because animators will break your rigs all day long. They will find a way, I promise. Lock and hide those scales. Alright? So we are almost done, you guys. We're literally going to constrain these joints to these controls, and we're going to be done for the day. Okay, so literally 10 more minutes, and then we are rolling to the weekend. Okay? Alright, this is going to be easy peasy Japanesey. I want you to turn off, go to show, turn off polygons. Alright, go to show and turn off polygons. Then I want you to go up to constrain option box for parent. Constrain option box for parent. And you want to keep maintain offset on. And literally what we're going to do here is we're going to select a control. Just pick any control, it doesn't matter. Then shift select the joint and hit apply. Then do that over and over and over. So select a control, shift select the corresponding joint, and hit apply. We're just going to constrain all of these controls to these joints. That's it. Oh my god, I am a genius. I have created 2 root joints. Why did I do that? Did anybody else create 2 root joints, or was that just me?
I deleted mine earlier.
Nice. How did I do that? Okay, so some of you guys have done this. If you haven't done it, I don't know how I did this, but I've created myself 2 root joints. I have an extra root joint here. It doesn't do anything. Okay, I'm going to show you guys how to remove that in case you do this ever. Very, very simple. Select the group of all the skins. Shift select the joint you don't want, and you go to Skin, Edit Influences, Remove Influence. Then you can literally delete it out of existence, and nobody's the wiser. Okay? Alright, so once you constrain all your controls, your rig should be donezo. You can literally move the entire thing by the root, grab each individual part, rotate it, move it. Some of these parts don't move, they just rotate. So you could use that, like for example the trigger one, you could actually lock and hide the translates on that as well, so an animator can't move that around. Like, what's the point, right? The bolt does not rotate, the bolt just moves, so you could lock and hide the rotates on that one. Same thing with the, I mean, all these parts, they either move or they rotate. That's it.
Is that like a courteous thing? Or, like, is that just per person?
It just makes it simple. I mean, and it makes it to where, I mean, you just don't want animators breaking your rig. I mean, if they break the rig, they're going to complain, and then you got to fix it. So you're just sort of like, might as well just lock it all down to where they, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, I don't know. It's like an etiquette thing, I guess. But anyway, this looks pretty cool. Any other things you guys, questions on this?
For the grease transformations, it keeps giving me an error.
Okay. I'll help you in a second. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Good work.
Could you just make sure to put it on YouTube or whatever? So I'm gonna recreate it.